Hello, everyone, members of the All Things You community. Glad that you all took some time out of your Saturday to be here today. Um, yeah, as most of y'all know, my name is Brian, and I guess I'm kind of the community manager over here. And today I am here with Tyler, and Tyler has been my longtime dungeon master. And we're here to talk about getting started in D&D and this, our first episode of our so far yet to be named, hopefully weekly D&D show. So I was trying to think of something clever, but that stuff doesn't really happen whenever you put yourself on the spot.
Nope, it's got to be organic. Absolutely.
All right. So the way that we're gonna kind of structure this today is we're gonna start with some, and it's very professional. We've got some prepared talking points that we're gonna go over, and then after we've kind of covered everything that we want to do, then or that we wanted to talk about, then we're gonna open up the floor to Q&A. So if you have any questions while we're talking, just feel free to make a mental note, make a physical note, whatever you need to do. Just hang on to those questions until the end, and we'll be happy to go over those with you. As you may know, our screen may look kind of funny. We decided that we would actually kind of conduct this show in the program where we play our regular D&D game. So anyone unfamiliar, this is Roll20, and this is a little one-shot that we did a couple of weeks ago. We had one of our members was sick, so we just kind of had to throw a game together at the last minute, and Roll20 is a fantastic place to do that. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Yes, Roll20 is a great tool. So anyway, and as we get those community games going, I'm sure that more people are going to want to play than just the ones that are doing so on stream. So we're even going to be putting up, be paying attention to the Reddit, signing up on the Discord, all of that stuff where you can find your own D&D groups within the community. So, Tyler, do you want to go ahead and explain kind of the relationship between you and I and D&D going forward?
Sure.
Get out of the way.
Absolutely. So I've been wanting to do writing some D&D content for a long time, and it's kind of a thing that Cooley and I have been talking about. He had been wanting to do something like this for a long time, and finally just decided to do the damn thing, and that has kind of encouraged me to also do the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
As of right now, again, we're very professional, so I have a subreddit because that is free and very easy for a technologically inept 31-year-old to use. So I'm essentially going to be writing just, there it is. That's very fancy.
Yeah.
Look at you. You have that prepared like Vanna White.
I know. Here's the actual subreddit.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you can see, I mean, we are, pretty much wizards whenever it comes to this kind of stuff. So.
Absolutely. Or bards. But yeah, so it's r/the_grim_bard. What I'm going to do, I have literally the one kind of rump of an article up right there, but I'm going to kind of post my playtest content and homebrew content as I create it. That way people can take a look at it, play it, eyeball it, give me feedback, tell me if it sucks, and if it sucks, how to fix it, with an eventual eye towards maybe playing some of it on this stream, getting feedback that way, and eventually posting it on DM's Guild so people can download a more polished version than just text on a Reddit post.
And I'll say this, I have some experience as a DM, and just it's a short little one-page article. If you ever see yourself running your own game, go and read this man's insights. Seriously, first couple of levels of D&D can be a real slog, and he's got some really simple but really innovative ideas for how to make them a lot more interesting for not only you, the DM, but for also your players.
Yeah, because that's the whole point, and I appreciate that very much, Cooley, because you want it to be fun, and especially when you're starting out as a DM, you're going to go buy the monster manual, and you're going to say, okay, cool, thugs, because I'm fighting humans. And then you're going to look down, and what your thug does is it swings the scimitar at them and gets stabbed. It's the only things that stat block can do. It's not fun for you to run as a DM, which the whole point is for you to have fun, and it's not fun for your players. The whole point is for them to have fun as well. So I appreciate that, Cooley.
Yeah, but we'll talk some more about that later. For now, we just kind of want to get started with what got us into D&D from the beginning and kind of how our experiences with the game have evolved into hopefully something that you guys will find a little bit more interesting than just reading pages and pages out of the player's handbook. So, first, is there? I know we've kind of gone over a little bit about like who you are and what your goal is here. Is there anything else you wanted to share with us about yourself?
I mean, I'm a HR rep living in Central Texas. I grew up in a little bitty tiny town. Honestly, I didn't really, despite a lot of evidence to the contrary, I didn't realize I was a nerd until I moved to college and met you and actually some of the people that are in this chat. I remember finally deciding that I needed to learn how to play Magic the Gathering just so I could understand the foreign language being spoken in my house after getting off shifts of work.
Oh man, those long nights at Prinny's dining room table learning Magic.
Absolutely. You almost made me quit the game because of this abomination called damage on the stack, which is a rule that they have changed because I was right. It was a terrible rule.
It was a terrible rule. You have to keep saying the phrase over and over. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. That's just the rule. It's probably a bad rule.
Absolutely. But what about you, Cooley? I mean, some of these people obviously know you, but I think we've got some people that aren't regular. How did you get into all this nerd junk?
Oh, that's yeah. I was a lot like you. I didn't really know that I was a nerd either. I was actually like kind of cool in high school, which is probably really weird for those of y'all that know me now. I know.
What happened, man?
I know. I was like a jock, and I was like class president and all of that crazy stuff, and then a terrible friend introduced me to a game called EverQuest. EverQuest went from being like this fun thing that I did in my free time during high school to reasons for me to never leave my house again. But it did open me up to making friends with people that I don't know, people like it opened up doors for me to make some of the best friends that I've ever had. And I'm pretty nomadic, move around a lot, finally settled down in Texas and got to know Tyler, Prinny, some other members of the chat, and then kind of our nerdism exploded exponentially. Magic was responsible for a lot of that.
The cardboard crack got us pretty good.
Yeah. But now I just the COVID hit and spend a lot more time in my house. I won't go into this details, but spend a lot more time at home and just decided, like, you know what, this is an opportunity for me to finally, like Tyler said, just to do the damn thing. So let me just encourage everybody, like, I know that everyone's got their own goals and probably most of us have jobs that we hate. So, you know what? If you got the chance, do the damn thing.
Absolutely.
Just, it costs very little to just go for it. So, anyway, so that's a little bit about me. So, what was your first experience with, like, pen and paper RPGs? You were telling me a little bit about this earlier, and you have a very weird story as far as, like, getting started.
Right, so any of y'all who've ever played D&D know that, like, 5th edition is fairly user-friendly and whatnot, and 3.5 is very fun, but it is the opposite of user-friendly for a new player.
Yes.
So Cooley and some
of
the other
friends... Just for those who are, like, brand new to the world of D&D, 3.5 is the third iteration of the Dungeons & Dragons rule set, and then, that's 3rd edition, and then 0.5 is kind of like a version 3.5. See, just explaining that is complicated.
Absolutely. This whole game is very complicated. It's honestly not as complicated as it sounds
No,
once
it's
you start
really
doing
not.
the thing, which is kind of part of why I want to do this thing and show actual play and whatnot, because it'll show you that the bar to entry is not quite that high. But 3.5, you and it might have been Prinny and a bunch of other people conned me into DMing 3.5 for my first exposure to the game, which is masochistic in hindsight. Uh,
I'm
our friend,
still playing, to be honest.
do what?
I can't believe you're still playing.
I guess I'm a masochist. I'm learning stuff about myself. But another one of our friends, promised me he would handle the kind of mechanical side if I would just kind of run the story and the NPCs and whatnot. And I think it was some sort of like module, some island hex crawl thing. I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
But eventually it stuck.
Very cool. Yeah, I kind of had a more traditional approach to the game, except I didn't even start in D&D. I actually played very little actual Dungeons and Dragons until I started playing with Tyler. I actually started off in a game called Shadowrun, which is a combination of high fantasy slash futuristic. It's this it's a really cool world. Um, they made a very, very poorly received video game based off of it. But anyway, my first character, I played a troll gang leader who really did not have any powers himself, but could just like call in dudes to fight for him. So I was always my approach to character building has never been ultra serious, and you can probably see that with my first character. Um, I don't remember his name or anything like that. And I think I only ended up playing in that game for one session before before the group had to go and to do their own separate things, or maybe they just didn't invite me back for the second session. Could have been. I'm. It was a rough start, but yeah. So after that, I would go on. I met some other friends here in Stephenville that ran insane role play games for like 10 to 12 people. Did a little bit of D&D 3.5, but I didn't really get um, into pen and paper RPGs until I played my first game of GURPS. And GURPS is such a ridiculous game. Imagine being able to take any negative thing that you want and like tack it onto a character in order to like give them a new power. So like my character was like illiterate, and he had no common sense, and he was impulsive, but it basically made him invincible in physical combat. So it was like the first time for me to really role play a character, and from then on out, I was just like, holy cow, this is so much more fun than just being like, ooh, a monk looks cool, let's roll those set of dice. Like
Absolutely.
that like really, really changed my perspective on the game, was just having that freedom to build whatever I wanted. Yeah, so my next question was to tell me about your first character, which is kind of tricky whenever you're a DM. Maybe like, what was like the first character that you really fell in love with playing?
Ooh, that's hard. Because I mean, as you know, I only get to play a character once every like 3 years.
Yeah.
Because I'm always the TM. Yeah, Pretty's right. It was a beguiler. That is a fantastic memory. The first character I played was a 3.5 goofy class called a beguiler. I think it's kind of based on the Bard chassis, which is what became my favorite class by far. A lot of my characters wound up being bards because a lot of the characters that I play are built around making the other characters look cool, while I'm just the goofy class clown comic relief type.
Yeah. He is your classic support.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think my favorite character that I've ever played, though, it's a group that I was playing with when I was out in Midland, and he was this, like, 300-year-old crotchety geriatric elf wizard with 8 constitution that was the party tank, because I built him like as Abjuration Wizard, so he would kick down all the doors and just try to hit things with a stick. And he's all covered in Geritol, and he's subscribed to AARP, but he's the tank, damn it. It was super fun. It was goofy as hell, but he took himself seriously. I did not take him seriously.
Yeah, that's fantastic. There was, oh man, I was trying to remember because like I was so convinced that you were going to talk about your Viking that we played. We played. I don't really remember much about it, but I just remember he was like pulled out of time to. Anyway, tell us more about your Viking bard.
I remember what you're talking about. It was for those of you who are more familiar with D&D 5e, he was a Valor bard, so more of a kind of Norse Skald type guy. That's from the 5th edition Player's Handbook.
Didn't he think he was a cleric? Was that, am I getting that mixed up with another character?
Kind of, yeah, he thought he was a cleric. No, you got it, because he literally just like a Viking from literal 867 Earth pulled into a fantasy realm who was just so crazy to begin with. Like, you know what? Cool. My magic, like I have magic now, and that's a troll. This is fine. This is more fun than killing Saxons. Let's just do this. And he had a complete death wish because I just wanted to tell a cool story. I didn't really care if he lived out some sort of power fantasy. I think, isn't that the one that I had make the shitting man illusion cartwheeling around?
Yeah.
And broke a poor character's brain in Alice's campaign. We were besieging a castle, and she was describing all these cool defenses and whatnot. And I was like, okay, I'm making an illusion of a soldier out there taunting. Then he starts doing cartwheels, and it was literally bathroom humor. But he just would do reckless, crazy things. And anytime I could make Alice's, our DM's eyes go wide, I had accomplished my goal.
Man, that was a fun game.
Agreed.
I would say, like I mentioned earlier, my GURPS character Chuck Bodine, who was so much fun to play. But another kind of like eye-opening moment was I normally play like big beefy dudes, and I decided that in my first real 5e experience, Tyler had actually started a game and asked me if I wanted to get involved in it. And I created a wizard, and man, I wish I could remember the name of this wizard. My gnome wizard. You remember that game, don't you?
I do, because you taught me some valuable lessons about how to not design encounters.
Yeah, if you ever want to like mess with your DM's head, just take anything that manipulates their characters, like hold a person and mind control and things like that. And yeah, but this divination wizard, I got really, really into writing his backstory, and invented like my no. But anyway, I got into this. There was like this cult that followed my dad and worshipped him as like a deity because my dad was like this crazy, groundbreaking scientist, and they thought that like what he was capable of was beyond science, and he had this divine power. And so, whenever Tyler read my backstory, he's just like, you know what? I'd rather do that than what I had prepared. And so that became like the whole focus. Tyler just said, you know what? Yeah, let's do that. And so that was such a cool moment, like that I have someone like not only like I just felt rewarded for the investment that I had made in the game and the character, and we're gonna get more into like what makes a good DM, but I just whenever he did the quintessential yes and it turned out to be like really, really fun and a great story. But
turns out you can learn a lot about DMing from watching Whose Lines Is It Anyway.
You're not wrong.
Erasmus Tinkersput, is that close?
Oh, yeah. Was that? Yes, I think Erasmus was his name, but I can't remember now if that was his fake name or real name.
Right. We will. Right, because that's your typical coolie freaking backstory, layers and layers, and it's all BS. Yeah, we will get back onto that later for sure.
Okay. let's see. So since then, um, what has changed about like how you make a character?
So, like I said, like that beguiler that Prinny referenced, which man, I was trying to remember the name of that class before, and I couldn't remember it. So props to Prinny. Like before, what I'd look at is cool. What's a mechanically interesting class to play, and I've since learned that you can play a champion fighter, which is the most kind of vanilla
Hmm.
subclass in the game. Interestingly, if you do it right, like Jake Hurwitz from Not Another D&D
Hmm.
podcast plays a champion fighter through level 20, and he is I had forgotten about that, Prinny. I had absolutely forgotten about that. But he plays that champion fighter, Hard One Sherford, so well, and it's mechanically very simple. So now all I really care about is what's a cool character that will interact well with a party and interact with the story and set up cool moments for the other characters. So even when I'm playing, I'm like a backseat extra DM because all I really care about is how do I make cool moments. So I want to do something weird like that elderly elf tank, or like in that one shot that Cooley pulled out of his butt at the last minute, just an old grumpy fighter with some bard levels.
Yeah.
Uh, I like old grumpy characters, apparently. 'Cause I veer completely away from the whole normal what's your power fantasy and how can you translate it to the table.
Hmm.
I want to just be what's my goofiness fantasy and put it on the table.
I'm so glad that you used those words because I think that that is the biggest mistake that new D&D players make is they think that D&D is all about the power fantasy. It's about
Absolutely.
rolling the biggest numbers. It's the first time that they like see Fireball and it's like how many dice is it? But that was also kind of that was a mistake that I made and why I didn't really get interested in Dungeons and Dragons whenever I got to play 3.5 is because like
Hmm.
I think like my first character was like a druid. I was like, oh, druids can shapeshift. Cool, I'm gonna be a druid, and that's all my character
Nice.
was. He didn't have a personality. He didn't have like he was literally just a stat block with buttons I could push. Like
Right.
there was I couldn't tell you anything about that character and then I did the same thing. I was just like, oh, okay, well that was fun. Now let's play a monk because monks like to punch. And like,
Hmm.
that was like my whole approach to building characters. And so really whenever like I said that turned around for me was whenever I was introduced to the GURPS system and then I was like, oh, characters can have flaws. And I think that like if you're into any sort of storytelling at all, like you know that flaws are what make interesting characters.
Hmm.
I mean, come on, how many superheroes are there, and how many people in the world have the favorite hero of Superman? Like hardly any, because he's just like Mr. Perfect, like never loses a fight, ultra powerful, whatever. Like he's a very blah character. Now don't come at me with,
Hmm.
but Superman has vulnerability. I don't care. No one likes Superman. But
Vulnerability is BS anyway. It's a made up thing. He either automatically loses to it or he wins automatically. There's no gray
right,
area. There's no conflict.
right. Um, but anyway, that's whenever I started to realize like personality is what makes characters. And
Hmm.
so I started from then on, like every character that I made started with a personality type. And that changed the way that I looked at role play. And
Hmm.
I just if not for that, like some people might say like, oh well, we don't have a cleric and somebody's got to have healing spells. Whereas like I don't in my favorite game that I've gotten to play in so far, I was like, you know what? If I'm going to play a cleric, he is going to be he is going to be a I can't even, a prosperity gospel preacher who's trying to con people out of their money.
Absolutely. Creflo Dollar was literally the character named Cooley. You didn't make it up because that's a real dude. You can
That's
Google him. He's terrible.
you can't
Uh,
make a fantasy name better than Creflo Dollar. I challenge you.
yeah, that's another one where like God, that's my favorite. We'll get into that later as well, that campaign. But that's one of my favorite campaigns that I've ever done because all of my players had me just rip up sheets and sheets of notes because once once Cooley's like, I want to play a prosperity gospel preacher who cons people out of money, I was like, okay, that's what we're doing now. Like Alice played a Minotaur luchador who wanted to found libraries all over the world.
I forgot about the library.
Absolutely. But then my whole thing, like every NPC that I designed to interact with Cooley was just like, how can I drag him further into this depraved ridiculousness? Like I had a character suggest, hey, you could sell Goldschlager for sacraments, and your god is a husband, call it rock swine. And it just became, let's role play a pyramid scheme.
Sacramental pyramid scheme.
And then playing Gunther, trying to just make you feel bad about yourself, because I had this NPC cleric who sincerely looked up to Creflo and thought Creflo is this paragon of virtue, which I could make Cooley make these awful pained faces. Because, oh, Creflo is the moral horse of this party, and if Creflo says it's a good idea, I believe him no matter what the facts say. And I could have him have fun defrauding people in 1 second and just feeling crappy about being a jerk in the next second. That was fun for me.
Yeah. Man. So, my phone. All right. So, again, do you feel like you have kind of like a character making process that like you go through, or does it vary from character to character?
It's pretty standard. Like I'm very much top down, to use kind of like I guess a magic set design terminology. I figure out like what the personality type, kind of what you're saying is, and then what fits that. Like for that one shot you pulled together, I wanted a grumpy battlefield commander, and especially once I figured out that Alice was going to play just like a big broody barbarian type. I just wanted somebody to just be a grumpy kind of comic relief to go along with that seriousness. So personality first, then mechanically what can support that personality afterwards.
Now, something that I always run into is you hit that part in the character creation. This is where most people start. If you're rolling to create characters, as far as like their stat blocks go, you are a lot braver than I am, because that stuff is crazy. I actually almost thought about calling this show Standard Array, but that's kind of the point bias where we figure out like the stats for the characters and things like that. But I always make sure that as I'm figuring out the stats, that I can justify how that fits with who the character is. Like we're playing a game right now. It's a noir style game where I'm playing a giant elephant detective, and as beneficial as dexterity is for any sort of melee character, dex is like the most powerful stat in the game for a multitude of reasons, but it counts towards your armor. You can use it for your chance to hit. You can use it for all of these different things. But
it's the most common saving throw.
Yes, absolutely. That didn't change the fact that I was an 8 foot tall or 7 foot tall, 800-pound elephant man, and couldn't justify having like 14 dexterity, which is
you
like.
Ever seen a nimbly bimbly elephant? I don't think so.
14 dexterity would basically be the equivalent of like a good gymnast, not like a great gymnast, but like. That's the one thing that I always have to ask myself is, do the stats make sense? And like, if you're just putting con points down so that you're less squishy, or dex points down so you have higher AC, or like if you're going to have like, I hate it whenever people roll up like warlocks who are just like emo and hate everyone, and they have no people skills, and they have 20 charisma.
Right.
How does that make any kind of sense? How does that stat fit with that personality?
It just doesn't.
No, like you're going to have so much more fun playing a character than you are playing a stat block.
Like, if you want to play a stat block, there's literal just like combat games, and if you want to run D&D as basically just a series of arenas, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't want to play that with you, but you do you.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's really like the only thing that I would say, like the only part of my process that I would say is crucial is once you figure out the personality type, make sure the
Hmm.
stats make sense. Um,
Absolutely.
so when did you know that this was going to be like your favorite hobby? Or, I mean, now that we've been talking about it, how did you know that this is something that, you thought was worth like pursuing making a living in?
Uh, so yeah, I mean, I said for a long time this is by far my favorite hobby because I mean, there's stuff that we're talking about that are literal. They're play moments from 8 years ago that we can still remember.
Yeah.
So it's a thing that you and your friends can bond about for decades. Like I'm never gonna forget. I was playing. I was running. I forget who all was there, but I know Alice and Trey were in the game, and Trey was just figuring out how to play basically. And he had this realization as he played. I forget which class. I think he was a bard. It might have actually been, I don't remember what it was, but he had cast Cloud of Daggers, which, for those of you not familiar with the game, it literally summons a cloud of daggers flying around in the air, so it makes an area where you don't want to stand. And our druid, Birdie, turned into a bear, because that's a thing you can do in this game, and kept just throwing the enemies into the cloud of daggers. And once Trey realized that this isn't a video game where you're like running from cutscene to cutscene and you're at the mercy of the writing and the plot, you make the cutscenes, you make the plot. He doesn't have to. There's no X button to tell your grizzly bear friends to throw the enemy into a cloud of daggers. That's not a thing you can replicate in a video game. Uh, so seeing the light bulb come on and him understanding how much creative latitude he has, I guess when I realized that I wanted to do this for like my main hobby was when I realized how much creative latitude I have, especially as a DM, because anything that the party experiences, you have to make. Uh, so it's that feeling of getting with a table of your good friends and making up a story and making up characters and forming memories that you're still going to have 8 to 20 years from now.
Hmm.
I don't know anywhere else to get that feeling.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I know that I'm beating a dead horse, but whenever you're sitting around telling these stories 8 to 10 years later, notice that we haven't brought up once like how big that fireball crit was, or
Yeah, yeah, that's an excellent point.
um, I kind of had a similar experience my very first time playing the game. This is whenever I realized like, well, actually no, this was I think the druid might have been my second character, the one where I was like, oh, they can change into stuff. Cool, that's me.
Hmm.
We were in a like a cave-in situation. I can't remember what had triggered it. I think like something about a kobold shaman. And anyway, we went down there, and that's exactly pretty. How do you remember this stuff? That's
Mine like
exactly
it's
the
still
story I
crap
was
that
going to
pretty.
tell. Um, anyway, so as a druid, I'm like, okay, well, forget this. I go a lot faster as a hawk, and so, oh, that's what. Okay, I go a lot faster as a hawk, so I'm going to turn into a hawk and fly out of this cave. Well, a friend of mine is playing a wizard, so he has casted levitate on himself and has realized now, like, oh, this doesn't make me faster. This actually makes it borderline impossible to move. So what he did was, as I'm flying by, he pulls out a lasso, and he thinks to himself, "Okay, I'm going to lasso a bird, and it's going to pull me out of this cave."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if y'all know the mechanics of levitate. It don't make you weightless. It makes you fly. And so, like, as he lassos me, we have to roll opposed strength checks, which as a bird, I think mine was like -2.5. And so I roll whatever it is that I roll. He lassos me, and I just straight into the ground as soon as the rope hits. We both die in the cave-in.
Mm-hmm.
I think like the fact that my DM allowed that all to happen
Oh yeah.
and then killed us for it, like I was like, this is a different kind of game. Like this is like, and yeah, like I said, if you might be tempted to be in, or if you're in that situation with the DM, how many times do you feel like, man, if I don't pull my punches on this, like these guys are gonna die? Like, do you feel tempted to do that?
No, that's like I always try to telegraph a situation where it's time to be silly, and a situation where I'm not gonna pull my punches. Like when you're riding around in the back of a flying sky coach and you're in a hot tub with a boat and a horse, like last Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably not about to die there, but when the elf telling the campfire story turns into an oni and tries to start killing people, absolutely.
That
If
was
you
epic.
make a few bad rolls, I will kill you without a second thought. Like I'm gonna design the encounter fairly, but I'll straight up kill you. And I mean I've been DMing since 2012. I've only had one PC ever die, and it was Portray's character Rodden, R.I.P. Pour one out. But it was
Rod
literally in
tackled the way.
so Rodden Tackle. I've got to give him his full glorious name. But he died. How many months did we play that campaign for, Cooley? Or was it over a year?
It had to have been. Yeah,
He died in the last 5 minutes of the ultimate boss fight of a multi-year campaign. Because he'll admit it. He made some mistakes, and I was gonna be damned if I pulled punches in the damn last boss fight. That's not gonna happen.
I wonder how many
Uh,
characters he's going to have to lose before he realizes when and when not to do things in character.
right, because I almost killed his character in our current campaign because he got in the middle of a bunch of pissed off gnolls as a rogue wearing leather armor at level like 2. I was like, that's a bad choice, brother. If it wasn't for the artificer heals from Alice, he would have died.
Artificer. Yeah, that character's broke.
So to answer your question, no, I don't pull punches. You have to. So that's a lie. I'll pull punches if I figure out mid combat that man, I screwed up the balance here. Especially as someone who homebrews every monster he throws at y'all. There's times where, like, man, I screwed up the balance here. I'm throwing them up against something that's too hard for their level. Yeah, I'll edit it on the fly. But if it's just y'all screwing up, no, you're gonna die unless you figure it out.
Yeah. Let's see. So, I guess this is kind of a loaded question. How long did how many hours of D&D do you think that you had to have under your belt before you felt like you were ready to run your own game? That you were going to that you could be a capable and confident DM?
Yeah, capable and competent. So it was probably honestly, this might surprise you. It was maybe like 2/3 of the way through that Killador campaign, that really long one.
Yeah.
Because I'm always, I mean, you know me. I like to get the negative feedback and figure out what I can do better. It was like the start of that campaign was just fairly standard. Here's a bounty board. There's a griffin by the old well. But by the time that I had Creflo doing his rock swine thing and Dusel was luchador wrestling and founding libraries, and Rod and Tackle had founded the Underground Tail Road, a series of essentially prostitute spies. I was like, okay, cool. So I've got something that each of my characters who want to be invested in the thing are invested in, and they're each having fun individually and collectively. I was like, oh, I think I'm an okay DM right now. It finally happened.
By the way, I will physically fight anyone who doesn't think that the Underground Tail Road is the best named organization in the history of fantasy.
Absolutely. There's a few Keldor things that I'm absolutely going to port into Eberron games that I run, and there's the Underground Tail Road exists in my Eberron. It just does.
Oh man. Man, I really wish that I tried to get Alice and Trey to be here too, but schedule. That's the fun part about D&D is trying to schedule with a bunch of grown-ups. But
I always say that the final boss of D&D is not a Tarask, it's not Tiamat, it's not some challenge rating 35 thing. It's the adult schedule. Because You can operate in good faith. Like I could have got a phone call today that said I had to drive to Arkansas for work, and
Yeah.
it would have been over with.
Yeah.
And that's when you have 4 to 6 adults all doing something like this. If the kid gets sick, if the wife's car breaks down, if whatever, there's nothing you can do about it except react.
Mhm.
Like Cooley, I really appreciate you making this one shot that we're kind of looking at right now,
Yeah.
because it was literally crap. Somebody's sick. What are we gonna do? Uh, yeah, the adult
Yeah.
schedule sucks.
So let's see. So then I guess that kind of leads us to the question: what makes a good DM?
So we talked about it earlier, and like I
This
approached
is
D
like
and
one of
D
your
as
biggest pet peeves.
yes. I approached D&D from more of like it's an improv thing. And I like on a scale of Monty Python to Tolkien, I like to be firmly on the Monty Python side. I'd rather have y'all like laughing than like, oh my god, this story is so epic. Uh, but it's being willing to sacrifice the story or the notes that you have spent hours writing. Uh, like you were still playing in the Storm Kings game when y'all went to Yartar, right?
I don't remember who that was or where that.
Uh,
Or
so if this becomes familiar, you'll know really quickly.
yeah,
So I had this city that's in the Storm King's Thunder adventure book, that it was going to be this intense, like where a lot of the plot threads were going to come together. It was going to be very dangerous, and I had like 3 really tough combats written for the session. But it became clear, like instantaneously after starting running it, that everybody was just in the mood to like goof around and riff on each other. So it's
yeah.
like, okay, this doesn't fit the tone of the room whatsoever. So I just literally I put my 5 pages of notes in my backpack, and turned Yartar, which is supposed to be the seedy, like Maltese Falcon type city, into just a shitty tourist trap. Basically, like or that National Lampoon's Vacation. Uh, like the mascot was Manny the Manatee. This is crappy. So welcome to Yartar thing, and it's one of like Trey and Alice's favorite sessions that I've ever ran for them, and it's just because I was willing to sacrifice what I had done to make the group have fun, basically. You have to just be constantly willing to adapt yourself. Your job as a DM isn't to tell this epic story. Nobody is thinking, oh my god, this plot the DM is saying is so good, it's so good. You can have the best plot in the history of Western literature. If your players don't feel like they have agency over that plot and the ability to change things, it straight up doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Because if they're not contributing and being collaborative with you, no one's going to think, like, in 8 years, no one's going to say, oh man, that plot twist that Grimshaw pulled off was so cool. They want to hear about, like, Alice made that freaking Manny the Manatee. She literally drew a poker chip with Manny on it. And I think that's to this day her, Roll20 avatar. She doesn't care about the cool combat. She liked Manny the damn manatee.
Yeah, and I think that if we could kind of boil that down into like kind of a motto or a slogan, this is something that I think that Tyler is really great at, is let the fun happen. Just talk about our most recent session. How long did it think that like Tyler let us know in between sessions that we were going to be acquiring magic items. So he to like go through and find stuff that we would be interested in and let him know. And how long into the session did you think it would take us to get our magic items?
90 seconds to 5 minutes.
And how long did it actually take us to get around to doing that?
Over 3 hours.
Well, because this all goes back to, again, there's the Escalade-styled airship with the hot tub in the back and all sorts of other shenanigans. And also, I got to say thank you, because that was one of the funnest sessions I've had in a long time, because you could have easily said that, no, you don't get your robe of useful items because it's such a dumb thing to have.
Right.
If you don't know, there's an item called the robe of useful items, which is just, you get to roll dice and get random things based on what the die rolls are. And I thought, you know, my character, who's a detective, could do something like get a helmet that can read minds, or I could just roll dice and get a bunch of random crap. So, it was just so ridiculous. Every single dice roll, like, let me see. I got two 24-foot ladders. I got a 10-foot pole, portable ram, a 12-foot rowboat, 1,000 gold, a magical door that I could just put in any opening, a horse, and a wand that casts a spell of alarm. Like, nothing, like, I don't know, it was so stupid and ridiculous, and Tyler could have so easily just said, take this +2 sword and shut up. We're not wasting 30 minutes rolling these damn dice. but because, like, he said yes, he let the fun happen, like, I don't know, it became one of my, like, I was laughing so hard by the end of the night. Like, it was, oh, man, that was so much fun. So,
it was good stuff. It's like plus, as a DM, free DM advice, if your players ever make the mechanically suboptimal choice, reward them for it. Like, to be clear about that item, and I think I buffed it even a little bit. Like, it's not just like you get some ladders and stuff. You basically reach into the pocket of a trench coat and pull out a 12-foot boat. So yeah, if he's going to make that cool, narratively interesting, mechanically suboptimal choice, I'm going to let him enjoy the crap out of it. And that's why, like, they're being flown back in the essentially flying Escalade to their home. It was cool. He asked, is there a hot tub in this thing? Like, there is now. Abso-damn-lutely. Then he gets in the back of it. And again, he's an 8-foot tall elephant man. So it's like, is there enough room in this hot tub for the boat and the horse? And I have the pilot press a button that extends the hot tub. There is now. So he's just floating in this flying Escalade hot tub with his boat and horse and ladder as elephant man. And that's going to be probably a scene Cooley remembers for years, where if I just give him a sword that makes him do more damage, I mean, he'd appreciate that, sure, but it's not nearly as fun, and that's the whole damn point, is to have fun.
Exactly. There are people in this chat who I texted that story to, because I was just so happy with this sheer randomness and silliness, and we just had so much fun that I just wanted to share that with people.
And that is crack to a DM, is hearing that is the takeaway that a player had is, man, that was fun, and hearing that you had so much fun that you wanted to share it with other people, that is the good DM crack.
Well, and I think that's pretty much why, like, we decided, I mean, this is like the first real organized thing that's been a part of this channel, and it's because like we love this game, and we want to be able to share our stories with you, and I want to, like, play with y'all and make new stories with you too. Like, that's
absolutely
the thing. Like, whenever I think community, whenever I think friendship, like, this is one of the first things that comes to mind, because this is the funnest thing that I have ever done with a group of friends.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and as I've been very unsubtly, like, complaining about, I get to play a character roughly every 3 years. So anytime anybody in this chat wants to run a dang game that I have the scheduling capacity to play in, I'm down. Hell, I don't mind running one-shots and whatnot. Because it's just any thing you can do with your friends that becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Like that, I couldn't have come up with that scene by myself, and Cooley couldn't have come up with that scene by himself.
Exactly.
But both of us just, like, bouncing off of each other and constantly yes-anding each other made something that was so fun for both of us that we could have. I could never have written that. That's not a thing.
Exactly.
And because it's something that we both have ownership over, it's something we both are going to cherish more than if it's just like me reading my cool plots to him.
All right, so I guess kind of the last question, and we've hit on a lot of this stuff as we've gone through, but I know that there are people who, like, I mean, you read this description. This is for players who are either just interested in getting started or anything like that. Any, like, more, like, common mistakes that you can think of that new players make, or just misconceptions about the game for people that have never played before?
For sure. So a thing that I really wanted to hit on, and we have kind of hinted at it, is so a very common trope is that a new player is going to build like the sulky edgelord rogue type
Mm-hmm.
because they think that they are writing a cool story starring themselves, and you're not. You're writing a story with a bunch of other people where you
Yes.
star in an ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
So like think of like Lord of the Rings. It's the classic fantasy literature. Aragorn, super cool character in the book. He would be a terrible character at a table unless really role played right, because his whole thing is I'm quiet, I'm mysterious, I'm better than you. You're not going to know anything about me until halfway through the story. That sucks. Like someone like Merry or Pippin from that book, where it's just I'm just going to goof off of each other and we're going to riff and be in a collective. That's a fun thing. And Cooley really hit on it earlier. Like what makes your characters memorable are their flaws, not their strengths. Uh, so don't go into it with the mind of how cool can I look. Think of it as how entertaining can I be to both myself and my friends, and that's a lot of times that's going to come from the flaws. If that makes any sense at all.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And as a DM, it's a thing we've talked about a lot, so I'm not going to beat the dead horse. But if you write a plot or a session and you get a third of the way through it and it's just not working, rip it up. Just like make a story with your players in that moment. They're not going to care that you don't have everything polished and prepped. Just if something's not working, tear it up and improv. Don't be afraid to do that. That's how you get really good at DMing. You could spend 20 hours prepping for a session, and something the players do in the first 5 minutes invalidates your prep work. So if you don't know how to improv, A, practice, but B, that's going to be how you have to do it.
Yeah. And on that same, I'm one of those people. Like I could get. I would love to DM a world of my own creation one day, but I get so bogged down with feeling like I need to know every single minute detail of this world that I've created that a lot of times,
Hmm.
or I think pretty much every time that I've tried DMing, if I wasn't doing just like fun Scooby Doo one shots, then
Right.
I was playing out of a module. And I'll say this: modules cripple creativity because like this game that we're playing here, it tells me this is like this is what you do. These are like the characters in the world. This is where all the treasure is. This is like what needs to happen in order to trigger this event, which triggers this event, which triggers the end of the story. That's not how real DMing works unless you're bad at it.
No.
Because
Agreed.
like you can't force your players to go down this very linear route to do everything that's expected of them and still allow them to have agency.
Yep.
And if they don't have any agency, yeah, I will say that it is like a handy tool for a new DM. I'll just say it's a crutch, and it might even end up like leading towards your players resenting you for them not having the freedom to do the things that they want to do.
For sure. And I mean, it's something that kind of as you get more experience, like you specifically, Cooley, as you DM more stuff, you're gonna get way more comfortable just ripping stuff out of it. Like, I don't run modules very often, and when I do, I normally just start with them, like use the opening few chapters, and then just make stuff up. But like running Storm King's Thunder for y'all, the cool stuff I kept, the crappy stuff I just deleted. And if you're even a one shot, if you're like, oh, the sword of Dawn is over under that pigsty, if the players don't go to that pigsty, make it be somewhere else.
Yeah.
Just adapt it. Like to your point, like the way I DM, it's not okay. They have to do this ABC chain to get to the thing. Like Rolf, kind of a semi antagonist that is in y'all's campaign. I don't really have a flow chart of what you've got to do to unlock different Rolf interactions. This isn't some sort of Bioware game. I just I keep notes on what Rolf's motivations are at any one time, and what he's doing adapts to what y'all are doing. There's no flow chart. There's just have 5 to 6 NPCs or factions or antagonist groups or whatever, and just keep in your head what would they be doing in reaction to this, and just go.
That is one thing that I can't remember who I heard this from, but it was someone who was giving DM advice. It says you don't have to know everything about every character in the world if you're playing a DM, or if you are the DM, if you're playing the DM. Now,
Right.
what you need to know is like what the characters' names are and what they want, and everything else will play out naturally.
Absolutely. Because you'll often find, based off what your players are doing, a more fun way to do it anyway. Like my wife bought me, what's it called, the Ghost of Saltmarsh deal for Father's Day, and there's a cool starting area for low-level characters in there. But when I eventually run somebody through it, hell yeah, I will rip up that character's motivations if one of y'all does something more fun. Just I'm gonna keep in mind what character A wants, and not put rails in front of them.
All right. Well, I guess this gets to the conclusion of my prepared questions. So, for right now, let's go ahead and open it up to the chat. I know y'all have heard us talk for a very long time. What questions do y'all have about getting started in D&D? Or maybe questions about us and our experiences with the game? Or what do you got for us?
Polish economic policy, really whatever.
Oh, here comes that question about Polish economic policy.
Right.
All right. Would you recommend this solo modules as a learning tool for new players without a group?
So, Mr. Heron, I wouldn't, only because, if anything, it would allow you to develop and kind of bake in bad habits, because kind of fundamentally playing any sort of solo module, it's not going to get really close to the feeling of actually playing the game. Like y'all who know me know how much I love sports metaphors. If someone's learning basketball and all they learn how to do is dribbling drills and shooting drills, they're not going to know how to operate off a pick. They're not going to know how to get open, how to make the good pass, how to avoid the steal. They'll be really good, I know, right, Prinny? They'll be really good at shooting. They'll probably be hell from the free throw line, but you're not going to learn how to actually do the thing. I know it's hard sometimes, especially, and Mr. Heron knows me from our time in exile out west. It can be hard to find a good group somewhere, because as much as I love D&D, I would much rather play no D&D than play with a crappy group, straight up. So the best thing you can really do is find people who already play, or read enough about it and just take the leap. Find people who are willing to take the leap and learn alongside them. Because that way, even if you develop crappy habits, you're developing them together, and ideally you figure out what's going on together. Because like when we started playing Cooley, there's stuff that in the rules we still technically get wrong, but it's what's fun for our group, and it's clearly not broken our group apart since it's 2020, and we've been playing since 2012. So it's not that big of a deal. And unless people are such jerks that you don't want to be playing with them anyway, they're not going to get mad that you don't know the rules. The rules knowledge is the least important part. It's learning how to kind of operate in a group and do that yes and thing. So to directly address your question, Mr. Heron, no, I wouldn't recommend solo modules. I would just recommend, well, for you specifically, pop into Roll20 and like play with me and some of my other friends once in a while. But even like I think there's a subreddit that's r/LFG that is literally, it's pickup games essentially for Roll20, the app that we are displaying to you here. So even if it's playing with a bunch of strangers, it's still experience.
And if I could just plug my Discord, there is a category down at the very bottom called Looking for Group. So if you're looking for people to play any game with, like D&D, if you're looking for anything, just like yeah, let's make this a community. Let's do stuff together. That's really my vision for this channel, is not just to be like a guy who plays games for an audience. It's I want to be a part of something. And
Agreed.
So, yeah, so look for those people, because I guarantee you, just in the few followers that I've got, the reason that we're having this talk right now is because there's people that want to play D&D.
And honestly, Heron, a thing that you can do until then, because I know that's a lot of steps to get to the spot you want, literally listen to, and I'm going to just put it in the chat, not another D&D podcast,
Mm-hmm.
because a whole lot of how to be a good D&D player is just knowing what is possible and how to interact in a group.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you just listen to a proficient party do the thing, it can give you kind of that vicarious experience. Again, to use a sports metaphor, just because I want to annoy Prinny, if you're the backup quarterback and you're picturing what it's looking like to have to execute the play, you're getting a rep even though you're not actually throwing the ball. So if you're listening to something like Not Another D&D Podcast, Critical Role, The Adventure Zone, you can, listen to it with a mind towards what would I do in this situation, and then listen to what they do, and you'll be literally learning from professionals.
Mm-hmm. And one great thing about Not Another D&D Podcast is, if you have never played a D&D before, then you're right there with Hard One Surefoot. Because literally the first time that they recorded the show was like the first time that he had played a D&D, and so you get to see him make all of the new player mistakes. You get to see him forget that he has any abilities whatsoever.
Right.
And you get to watch him evolve into a somewhat capable player.
And here's the crazy part. They literally play.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, they played 100 episodes of that campaign, and during like episode 90 something, he's still remembering some mechanical stuff, because ultimately that doesn't matter. But he did literally make a lot of these new player mistakes we're talking about. Like, he went in with this, I'm Hard One Surefoot, the bastard of the mountain, this badass warrior, and he'd keep like trying to do these cool RP things and roll a natural one. And in fact, like, the shirt I'm wearing is a Hard One Surefoot shirt.
Watch this,
because he'll constantly say something like, "Oh, I'm gonna leap over that wall in one shot. Watch this," and roll a natural one, which is as bad as your character is literally capable of doing. So pretty quickly, Jake Hurwitz evolved Hard One Surefoot from being this badass power fantasy into having flaws and kind of humanizing him, and actually making someone that was fun for the ensemble. So you get to see somebody make all the rookie mistakes that hopefully you won't have to make after seeing them make it. If that makes sense.
So I hope we answered your question. So, do we have any other questions? Well, was there anything that you were just really like wanting to bring up while we've been talking, or we pretty much cover it all, Tyler?
I mean, that's really. Oh, there we go, Mr. Heron. Are there classes you would recommend new players avoid?
Well, I can say that Rangers are just bad, but
right.
but they're bad. No,
pretty.
I would say this: do not obsess over like power level, because I'll say this: like the most fun that I've had playing this game was as what everyone, the D&D min-maxing community considers the trickster cleric to be the worst, most underpowered character. The arcane trickster rogue is the weakest rogue class that you can possibly pick, and I mashed them together, and it's the most fun I've ever had playing D&D. So I would say that, like, is there anything that you would like? If something just doesn't sound interesting to you, then stay away from it. If you don't want to be a crit fighter who the only interesting thing that you can do is roll a dice and pray that it's an 18 or higher, then then stay away from that. Or if that simplifies the gameplay enough to where you can focus on the role play and not have to worry about other things, then just what you should avoid is what doesn't sound fun.
Absolutely. Pick the concept that feels like something you'll have fun playing, and I would recommend if you're really starting out, playing kind of one shots and two shots to get a little sampler platter.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to commit to playing a champion fighter and then a year later you're like, man, I made a mistake just trying to pick a simple class. But I mean, any halfway decent DM, if you even do that, will let you switch characters. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are intimidated by playing caster characters as a complete newbie. It depends. I think I can understand wanting to get in there and just be a marshal. Rogues are super cool because they're simple, but they have. It's really easy to not be a bad rogue, and if you're a really good rogue, you can do really well. So I like it as a beginner class because you can interact in so many different ways, and it doesn't matter if you don't understand the mechanics. Because I mean, if all you do is walk up and stab the right person, you're still doing plenty of damage. And once you know how all your abilities operate, you can really, really, really take over different encounters.
Yep. And I would say this, don't get so locked into classes that you forget about things like skills. Because I think that in a lot of ways, skills are what makes the character, even more so than the class. So don't forget about things like what you want to do out of a fight.
Absolutely, because I mean, the vast majority of D&D campaigns, most of your time is not spent fighting.
Yeah, exactly.
Roll, what is it, Dropout, Roll20 thing, like Brendan Lee Mulligan, what they do, he literally does a plot talkie episode, a fight episode, a plot talkie episode, a fight episode, and that type of pacing, it's pretty common. I mean, Cooley, how many weeks have we gone before where y'all didn't roll initiative in different campaigns that I've run?
I know in this campaign, I don't think that we've gone 2 full sessions. We'll definitely have gone a session and a half, but then you'll make up for it by having 2 fights in the next one that take up almost our whole 3 hours.
Right. Absolutely.
So, don't think of combat as the end all be all.
And that's another reason I really like rogues is they're so capable at the kind of stealthy type stuff that you can be the stereotypical trap monkey. You can sneak in and do infiltration stuff, and you can operate in both sides.
I was about to say, I don't know, do we want to get into action economy and talk about how to get the most out of a character? But probably not.
That's more intermediate. I mean, that is a thing I think about a lot. I like to have a button to press at all times. See, Prinny, you're getting it now.
See, and what's really funny is wizards are the opposite of interesting whenever it comes to action economy. Because do they, or unless you multi-class them, they're not going to be able to utilize reactions and bonus actions and things like that. But I don't know.
Oh, he's just following my advice to shout your class name out at all times. And wizards can be really fun. The full casters, if you want to just start with the full caster, that's cool too, because all you really have to do is you learn a cantrip or two, and then you just read a spell book. If you look at the 5th edition player's handbook and just look at a spell list for whatever class and level you're starting with, if it looks like cool effects that you can do and that sounds like a fun thing, just do the damn thing.
Yeah.
Your DM's not going to be like, oh, you rolled 3d6 instead of 4d6. You're a scrub. Get away from the table. No one cares. Just try it, and it's not hard to figure out.
Agreed. trying to think of any other like really basic. Like I want to say cleric because like they can do everything, but do they really? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, clearly everybody should just play bards at all times because they are objectively the best class in the game. But not that I'm biased.
Let's see. Do we want to talk about like what Unearthed Arcana is for new players, or do you think that those are more for like intermediate level players?
I think that's more intermediate. Pretty, you say that the most fun one shot I've ever played in was my DM Stephanie in Midland. Literally had a one shot where all four of us played as bards, and it was a one shot that was a music competition. It was ridiculous. I played like a Les Claypool from Primus, basically, if he was a glamour bard. It was very, very fun. Man, what was I talking about before Russell started talking about bards? That's distracting. Oh, Aerosmith. That's very good. But yeah, so and hopefully for a new player you have an experienced DM, because a thing that I love is when a player comes to me as the DM is like, hey, here is the character concept that I want to play. How do I make that?
Yeah.
Because then I can pull from what I know about Unearthed Arcana and 4 to 5 different source books, and you don't have to do the studying. I'll just send you the thing. Like Trey wanted to play essentially a Thor type character, so I found a bunch of subclasses and whatnot that would fit that, and did the thing. And also, actually, that's a thing we can talk about real quick, especially for a new player who might not realize that you can do this. A good DM, in my opinion, will let you reflavor stuff pretty liberally. So if you can't find kind of the feel of a character concept you want to play in a book somewhere, it doesn't matter. Pick something that is theoretically mechanically compatible with it, and just pretend it's something else. Like a lot of people wish that the Warlord class from 4th edition was still in 5th edition, because they enjoyed the kind of their fantasy, essentially. The character concept they wanted to play was this mundane leader without magic, making everybody around him better. So a lot of people play a bard, especially a Valor bard, and just reskin and reflavor the bard's magical abilities as just mundane stuff. Like Healing Word isn't pulling musical magic out of the aether to give more hit points to your allies. It's essentially encouraging your allies, and through some adrenaline surge, giving them the toughness to continue the fight. So if you have a concept that you want to play and you can't find a class that is like meant for it, work with your DM and reflavor it. It'll work. It'll be fine.
Yeah, and whenever he means reflavor, he doesn't mean like changing like, well, I want this to roll d12s of damage, and it says it'll roll d6s, and no, it means like changing like the way that things look. It's like I really want to use this fire spell, but my character is like, they have like this whole, I don't know, like necromancy theme going on. It's like, okay, well, why can't it use necrotic damage? Why does it have to look like a fireball? Why can't it look like a raven? You know, like talking about changing the flavor like that. Taking things that are already in the game and just changing the way that they look, the way that they feel, not the way that they mechanically function.
Correct. It's all flavor. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, this whole hobby is collaborating and making a story together. So don't let the fact that nobody who has written these books has had the same character concept as you prevent you from making yourself. Now, one thing I will advise new players to avoid is, for the love of everything, do not homebrew mechanical stuff until you really, really, really understand the system.
Yeah.
And you'll find all sorts of awful homebrew on the internet. Or like, this is my custom race that has a D20 hit dice and can see through walls and mind control people at will. I think it's pretty balanced. It's not. It's crap, and you should feel bad for writing it. Just mess with the flavor all you want, but until you're, I know for you, that sounds like something you would want to do. But until you're like really comfortable with the game and the mechanics of it, don't try to change the mechanics. Just don't do it. Once you're comfortable with it, change all the damn mechanics. I change mechanics all the time, but I've been doing it for 8 years. So somewhere between 1 week and 8 years, you're absolutely allowed to change the mechanics.
All right. So, any other questions from the audience? I really appreciate y'all getting involved in the chat.
Absolutely. Either questions or just a thing that you are curious about that you want us to rant about for a little while. Essentially, just give us a question, give us a topic. Can you play as Nightcrawler? Yes, yes,
Misty
you can.
Step is a thing.
That is absolutely a thing you can do.
Also, my cleric con man, one of my favorite things to do as him, I cast a spell called Blink, which actually made him teleport in and out of alternate dimensions. It was super fun. So basically, I would only be in the world during my turn, and no one could attack me on their turn.
Good stuff. It's
yeah.
Exactly, and
there's a dog.
That's exactly Nightcrawler. Yeah, if anytime you have a concept like that, also just Google. Like, Google is your friend. 5th edition's been out for literally 8 years, so you're probably not the only person who has wanted to do the thing you want to do.
Right.
There's probably a Reddit thread about it. So just Google. I think most of the people that I've seen in this know how to get a hold of me and Cooley, just like in our lives. So also shoot us a text.
Yeah, just be careful of anything labeled homebrew.
God, yeah, just even some of the unearthed arcana. So your kind of original question a minute ago, Cooley, while we wait for them to ask us a question. What unearthed arcana is, I can't say that word for some reason, is essentially official playtest material from Wizards, the company that makes D&D. They put out a thing. They have people play it, whether it's a new class or a magic item or a new rule set, and they get feedback in it about it. And if they like it, they put it in a book. A lot of tables will let you play stuff that you find on Unearthed Arcana. Some will not. Some will only let some of it come through. Because some of it you can just, like, I let Trey play the old Unearthed Arcana Mystic for a few sessions, and I wanted to just flip the table. And it wasn't anything Trey was doing wrong. That was just such a poorly designed class that I would never let it be at one of my tables again.
So to answer your question, yes, be Nightcrawler.
Absolutely. Live your truth, Brenny. Your Nightcrawler truth.
Okay. I don't know why this was filtered by the mod, but this says, can I play for free, or do I need my own copies of books, lists of abilities, and spells and junk?
Oh, that is weird. I don't know why it would be filtered. Can I play for free or do I need my own copy of the books? So you don't really need the books necessarily. A lot of, like, I think nearly anything that's not just like character creation rules, Cooley, and correct me if I'm wrong, is on the SRD, which is essentially the system resource document, which is, you don't need to know those acronyms, but
yeah, the very, like, to get started, I think that you can get everything that you need, more than enough, just from Wizards' website.
Yeah, because I mean it's in their best interest to give you the first taste for free, essentially, and get you hooked. But again, a lot of it just depends on somebody's situation. Like, if you're wanting to play with somebody experienced, like if you're in a game with Cooley and I, for instance, we're to help you figure out how to get your concept going. If I had to literally fill out a character sheet for you and email it to you, I'll do it. I don't give a crap. And most DMs or experienced players would also be willing to do that for a newbie, I
Now,
think.
and if you are looking for maybe like just lowering the initial startup cost, doesn't what's it called? The actual Wizards service that you can sign up for just like a few
D&D
dollars a
Beyond?
month. Yes, D&D Beyond gives you access to all of that stuff, and I don't know if they have a free trial that's offered, but I don't think it's more than a couple of dollars a month. So if you wanted to just sign up and give it a try, that would give you access to the books.
And here's the beautiful part. I understand that not everybody has like any sort of big discretionary income budget, but especially if you're only going to play, like literally the player's handbook is basically all you need. And
Yeah.
it's in my bedroom right now, so I don't really want to go get it. But I have my original player's handbook from when it came out back in 2014 that I paid $50 for 6 years ago. That literally I played it so much that the bindings fell apart, so I had to get my friend Nat to take it to Staples to get the bindings cut and then put it in a spiral thing. So if I tried to calculate how much every hour of use of that thing that I got out of it was, it's less than a cent an hour at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the
It's
MSRP on those definitely is not $50 anymore.
for sure because I know the book that Bailey got me was like $30, and it was a pretty new, uh,
Yeah.
like pretty new deal. But even if they came out with sixth edition, the new iteration tomorrow, it doesn't matter. People still play first edition, and
Hmm.
that crap came out in like what 1980,
Yeah.
1978.
Yeah. I,
Um,
I I think it was 80, but anyway. Also, there is something called the D&D 5th Edition Essentials Kit, which is actually a really good way to get started. I picked it up just for the sake of having like entry-level stuff to play with my family, and I
hmm
think you can get that for like $11 on Amazon.
Yep.
So, and it's got it's got a watered down version of the player's handbook in it, and then it also has like its own really cool systems. Like there's like a follower system to where if you can only find one other person that can
hmm
play D&D with you, then you can like basically rent henchmen to come and help you out.
And that's a good point. Like through this quarantine shenanigan, my wife wanted to get into D&D because she hears me talk about it all the time. So, and her schedule sucks because she's in school and working at the same time. So she can't play in the game I have with Cooley, Trey, and Alice. So I literally run a kind of one-on-one campaign with her, and it works just fine. This will surprise nobody. I have a bard that follows her around and keeps her healed up and whatnot, and helps her do stuff. But it doesn't. There's a lot of different ways to enjoy the hobby, and once you own a PHB, you never don't own it anymore.
Hmm.
And that's literally all that it would ever take to get you invested and in the hobby as a player. DMing, it's a little different. It's more of an investment, time wise, potentially money wise. But as a player, that's literally all you ever need.
And just to make sure that we've said the full phrase aloud, PHB is an acronym meaning Player's Handbook.
Thank you, Brian.
All right. Well, anything else? Don't honestly like I'm cool with like wrapping it there if we need to. I still have that watch party scheduled in about an hour if anybody wants to watch what looks like a hilariously terrible movie called Guns Akimbo.
Oh no.
Let's just tune back into the channel here at in about an hour from now. But yeah, I'm not gonna like force Tyler to sit around and stare at the screen. He's already volunteered enough of his time for free tonight. Anything else? Mentioned r slash the underscore grim underscore bard if you want to check out Tyler's content as he publishes it. Um, anyway, have you got another project that you're working on? Maybe clue us in on what your second post is going to be about?
Sure. So it's going to be a continuation of the first one, essentially. Like for anybody who hadn't looked at it yet, which is probably very few people because I wrote it and posted it last night. Uh, it's essentially, I think that a bunch of the lower level monsters in the monster manual are boring sacks of hit points, and they're not fun to run as a DM, and they're not fun to fight against as a player. So I'm going to be putting together essentially my own little bestiary monster manual roster of enemies, whatever you want to call it, of low level monsters that are easy for a GM to run, but still tactically interesting. And then as time goes on and I get that filled out, I'll do from 5 to 10 and on up. So eventually I want to have essentially my own monster manual that I wrote.
Wow. That's an ambitious
that's
project.
Yeah, it's going to take months, to be clear. But essentially what I'd like people to do is, as I post stat blocks and whatnot, either just eyeball them, play test them if you're running a game for somebody, and what's up, twin Lucas? But just see if you like it or not, and tell me if you have any feedback, if there's a way to improve it. That's all it is, really.
All right. So yeah, be on the lookout. That stuff is also going to be cross-posted to the All Things You subreddit. Yeah, and make sure that you're signed up there so that you can have your voice heard as far as upcoming events, take part in what we're trying to do here as a community, be paying attention to our Discord as far as announcements for upcoming streams, and hopefully stay tuned for what is going to be a as of yet unnamed weekly D&D show starring myself and Mr. Grimshaw. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, any parting words for our viewers?
Do the damn thing. If you can find a group to play with, do so. If you want to get in on some of the stuff that we're going to do, because I'm sure we're going to play some like with your followers and whatnot, even if it's kind of abbreviated one shots. Because selfishly, I plan on writing some one shots, so it'd be a cool way to play test those on the stream. So even if you can't find a group, just be patient and participate here, and we'll do the thing. Playing or talking, like I'm envisioning playing.
Yeah.
Coolly. Like hopping into Roll20 and just doing the damn thing.
Exactly. All right. Well, I really appreciate y'all listening. This is a good turnout for this. So, yeah. Anyway, going to take a little bit of a break and hope to see y'all back for Guns Akimbo. I'll see y'all later.
Later, y'all.